From WAMU 88.5 at American University in Washington, welcome to the Politics Hour. I'm Patrick Madden, sitting in for Kojo Nnamdi. Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's a contributing writer with City Paper. Tom, as always, thank you for joining us.
Happy to be back.
And you can join us by calling 1-800-433-8850 or email us at kojo@wamu.org. And, of course, you can get in touch with us through Facebook or tweet at Kojo Show. You know, Tom, it's hard to talk about anything else right now except for the shutdown, the partial government shutdown, and just this impact that it's having right now across the region in so many different ways. But, you know, first and foremost for these workers that today are now not getting a paycheck.
Yes, I think you can say the shutdown itself is indefensible, no matter who you want to blame. Clearly, President Trump said he would take the blame, and I think that's where it goes. But these are people who are not only getting paid and suffering the consequences of that, but they're also not doing, most of them are not even working. They're furloughed, which means they're not even able to do the work they do, the vital work they do for the federal government in so many different ways. It's a terrible situation. I just hope we figure out some way to end it soon.
Right. And I mean, I spent yesterday talking with federal government employees at unemployment offices. I spoke with contractors.
Yeah, that was a really good story you did. I think that was good.
Thank you. And just, you know, the hearing their personal stories, it's devastating.
Yeah, I did a little story for the City Paper, and this is a small thing maybe, but I went to a beauty salon in downtown Washington, which more than, you know, almost 24 seats, and one of the persons I interviewed there, she said, you know, she normally, her business is cut in half. And now going to a salon is not just an ego trip. It's people who do that for their professional reasons, men and women. And the lower income people who help the stylists, they're not getting tips. They're not getting paid. Carry-outs downtown, across the board, and across the country. I think people sometimes forget 85% of the federal workers are scattered throughout the United States, not just here in Washington.
And I think the one question that no one knows the answer to right now is, how is this thing going to end? And hopefully our first guest is going to help give us some insight into this. We are joined on the phone with U.S. Senator from Maryland, Chris Van Hollen. Senator Van Hollen, thank you for joining us on the Politics Hour.
Patrick, it's good to be with you and Tom.
Good. Senator, can I just ask you right away, because you were out in Laurel, Maryland today with Mr. Ball, the Howard County executive, and Senator Cardin. You were meeting with federal workers at the Savage Library in Laurel. They had some sad stories. I didn't get to go, but someone said there was a Secret Service person there who made the comment that Secret Service agents will take a bullet for the president, but this president is not paying them.
Well, that's right. Senator Cardin and I met with 16 federal employees this morning out in Howard County, and one federal service contractor who just laid off 173 of his employees because as a federal contractor, he's not getting paid. But you're right, Tom. We heard from federal employees, and I think the first thing to emphasize was that they all said, let us go back to work and do our jobs for the American people, because when we're not providing those services or the health protections, the American people lose. And then we did hear about how this was really negatively impacting their own situation. Many of them were one paycheck away from being able to meet a mortgage payment. And, of course, today is the first day where they will not get a paycheck. People actually got stubs showing zero. And you're right. There was someone from the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association who pointed out that while some of the key law enforcement personnel, like the Secret Service, remain at work because they're essential employees, that they are not getting paid for it, like the Secret Service. He also pointed out that a lot of the other folks in federal law enforcement who provide the backup DNA analysis and other sort of support for their efforts to track down fugitives or suspects, that they're not able to get that support, and that actually puts at risk the lives of the federal law enforcement officials who are out there working every day now without pay.
And you can join this conversation by calling 1-800-433-8850 or email us at kojo@wmu.org. Senator, can you just tell us what the latest is, what's happening right now on Capitol Hill? Is there any new developments that, might somehow end this shutdown?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I just came off of the floor of the United States Senate, where I returned from this meeting with federal employees in Howard County, Maryland, to talk about the increasingly harmful impact of the shutdown on people throughout the country and, of course, on the hundreds of thousands of federal employees who are not getting paid. And the only reason we're in today's session is because Senator Kaine and others of us insisted that we shouldn't just be packing it up and going home when we have it within our power here in the United States Senate to end this shutdown. And that is why yesterday, Senator Cardin and I took to the floor and we made two simple requests for what's called unanimous consent, asking the Republican leader, Mitch McConnell, to bring up two bills that passed the House on their opening day and that we should pass here in the United States Senate. One bill would open the 8 of the 9 departments that have nothing to do with Homeland Security. No reason to hold them hostage and the people who depend on their services and their employees hostage. That's crazy. And the kicker is that these are bills that the Senate, on a bipartisan basis, has already supported. So there's no justification for us not to vote yes. The other bill I asked for unanimous consent on was to do exactly what the Senate had done just before Christmas. Open the Department of Homeland Security until February 8th, current levels of funding, and then we can work to just figure out and negotiate the most effective way to provide border security. This has never been a question of whether we need secure borders. Of course we do. The question is what's the smartest, most cost-effective way to do it. And unfortunately, yesterday, Senator McConnell blocked our ability to vote on something that he has supported in the past. And his reason was, well, the President of the United States doesn't want this. Well, and what we're saying is, and I'll just end with this here, we are a separate, co-equal branch of government. Let's do our job.
Senator Mitch McConnell, people know that he can wheel and deal as necessary in the legislative body. Why is it, do you think, that he is yielding so much to the president? Even at the press conference this week, he stood by the president after their meeting and said, we're all together on this, when you know, in fact, a good number of Republican senators are privately saying they don't like what's happening either. Why is Mitch McConnell standing so closely with President Trump on this? I know he's a Republican leader of the Senate, but it seems at odds of what he might normally do if he had his own way.
Well, that's right. I mean, Mitch McConnell has said repeatedly over the years that government shutdowns are really stupid. They're destructive. They hurt the country. And yet now he's essentially become an accomplice with President Trump to the shutdown because he's refusing to hold this vote. As you said, the good news is that day by day you have more and more Republican senators who are agreeing with the position that Democrats have taken, which is stop holding all these federal departments hostage, stop holding federal employees hostage. First, open the government, and then we can negotiate the issue of border security. I was just, as I was leaving the Senate floor, Senator Murkowski was on the floor shortly after that, and she has made the point, let's open the government first. So we need to keep the pressure on because, Senator McConnell should not, be able to just say, well, the Senate's not going to do its job. Under the Constitution, we're a separate branch of government, co-equal. Let's do our job, especially when the keys to opening the government are right at the Senate desk. These two bills are sitting there. We could bring them up at any moment.
And Senator, I want to go to one caller. This is Rob from Alexandria, who wants to ask you about, why don't the Democrats just sort of meet the president halfway? Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Senator. Nice talking to you, sir. I live in Virginia, but I'm still a big fan of yours. So my question is, as you all know, we have a partial border fence, San Diego, Nogales, other places. They want to add to it. all I hear, and I'm a fundamentally Republican, but I have some Democratic leanings, but here is that Nancy and Chuck to say no, no, no is being, to me, just crazy. Why can't you guys say, hey, look, I'm not going to give you a 5.7, but we'll give you something, but negotiate instead of adamantly saying no.
And maybe buy the DACA bill that you guys have been wanting.
Well, a couple things. First of all, thank you for calling in. And I do want to emphasize that this disagreement has nothing to do with whether or not we want secure borders. We cannot have open borders. We need to have strong, secure borders. And in fact, as the caller suggests, long before President Trump was elected, we have barriers, fences, walls, whatever you want to call them, along certain portions of the border where they're strategically located and where they're needed. And so there's no dispute about the need for that to be one piece of an overall strategy. But the fact of the matter is the president himself, in his budget, I'd be happy to come over and show it to you, asked for $1.6 billion this year. And then he turned it into this big political football, wanting to build his 2,000-mile wall. And it's not, it's not a question of $2 billion or $5 billion. This will end up costing at least $30 billion because that's what it costs to build a full wall. And then the president will come back every year and say, I'm going to shut down the government if you don't, pay more for this 2,000-mile wall, which experts tell us is not the most effective way to provide border security, and which, by the way, despite his efforts at revisionist history, the president said that Mexico was going to have to pay for, not American taxpayers. So we have been very clear. We support strong border security. The bill that passed the United States Appropriations Committee actually had the president's request in it, the original request, and it's the president who then keeps walking away from his own requests, and most recently walked away from, the commitment his vice president had made to Mitch McConnell that, let's keep the government open at least till February 8th while we negotiate these things. So, and Tom, to your issue on DACA, as you know, last summer, the president said he wanted a, quote, bill of love. And he said to senators, go work it out. And we had a bipartisan bill on that. And the president totally pulled the rug out from under that effort, even though we had a majority U.S. senators for it. So we're dealing with somebody who constantly changes his position, walks out of meetings, and then denies his own vice president and his own team the authority to negotiate. So it's been tough.
And Senator Van Hollen, it sounds like you're focused on putting the pressure on the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and if the proposal you've talked about sort of shutting down Senate business, but aren't there consequences if that happens?
Well, we're not talking about shutting down Senate business. We're talking about keeping the Senate open. In fact, the reason we're open today on the floor is because Senate Democrats wanted to keep it open and not go home. We're saying let's keep it open, but let's make it our first order of business to reopen the part of government that's shut down. So we're open. Let's just do what the House did and make it our very first order of business to reopen the government, and then we can go on and do the other business of the Senate. But our first order of business, as we're open, should be to open the whole government, restore services to the American people, and make sure that we stop denying pay to federal workers, whether they're who are working now or have been locked out.
Senator, this is the number one issue, but on a short time here, I want to ask you about two other people. You served in the Maryland General Assembly before you went to Congress, and then to the House and the Senate. Senator Mike Miller. I want to give you a moment to talk about him. Prostate cancer announced this week, and just your own personal thoughts about him.
Mike Miller is a giant of Maryland politics. He is the longest-serving Senate president, not just in Maryland, but I believe in the country. But it's not just his longevity. It's really the fact that he has made an incredible mark on Maryland in a positive way during his years of service. He's always been somebody who can, bring the state Senate together and lead the state forward on important issues over time, whether it's been gun safety or trying to raise the state minimum wage. And now he's hurting. And my thoughts go out to him. I look forward to seeing him shortly down in the Senate. I saw him recently. He is a great historian, as you know. He's a great historian of the state of Maryland, and that's what I think is his anchor and gives him such good perspective on where we've been and where we need to go.
And he said he's going to power through the General Assembly. That's good. I want to also ask you about Rod Rosenstein, former U.S. attorney in Maryland, appointed both by a Republican and a Democratic president. The Deputy Attorney General has said he's going to be leaving the Justice Department. He has been the rock-solid person on the Mueller investigation. What is your concern? What are your thoughts about Mr. Rosenstein possibly leaving, or saying he's going to be leaving the Justice Department?
I'm very concerned about the integrity of the Mueller investigation and the need to protect the integrity of the overall Justice Department. The Justice Department should not be the political wing of the White House. The Justice Department has got to be the place where every American knows that they will get equal justice under the law. I was honored to speak at the confirmation hearing for Rod Rosenstein and recommend to our colleagues that they support him. And I've been very pleased to have done that. He has been the bulwark against undue political influence at the Justice Department, has protected the integrity of this nonpartisan Mueller investigation. So this is alarming news. We're going to have to be very vigilant to make sure that the Mueller investigation is protected, but this certainly makes it more vulnerable.
And Senator Van Hollen, but before we let you go, because it sounds like it is going to be a very busy day on Capitol Hill, how do you think, I'm just curious, how do you think this is going to end? If you were a betting man, how does this shutdown end?
I do think it ends when a lot of our Republican Senate colleagues say enough is enough, and they insist on a vote here in the United States Senate. Now, people can say, well, that doesn't matter because the president's just going to veto it. But the reality is that changes the dynamics. The president vetoes it. It comes back here. I would point out that one of those bills to reopen government has provisions that had a vote in the United States Senate previously of about 93-7, I believe it was, more than enough votes to override a presidential veto, which is why when Mitch McConnell refuses to hold a vote, he's just protecting the President of the United States and shielding his members from calls that they're going to get from right-wing talk show hosts, but really, it's going to be harder and harder for them to justify refusing to vote to open the government when that they would be voting on things that they have supported within a period of weeks and months. So, meanwhile, we can discuss the best way to provide what everyone agrees we need, which is good border security. But I think there's a growing consensus, even among a growing number of Republican senators, that we should first reopen the government, end this nonsense. Tomorrow we will mark really a shameful day in American history. We will have had the longest government shutdown in history. President Trump said he would be proud of a government shutdown, but nobody should be proud of what's happening.
Well, we should point out in Maryland, as we let you go, the Governor Hogan, Republican Governor Hogan, who has a 77% approval rating, which you probably would be jealous of, he too thinks that what the president is doing is a terrible thing, not only to the federal government, but to the country as a whole.
Look, we have federal employees, one who went to the internet the other day to set up a GoFundMe account to be able to make the monthly installment on her son's college payment. I talked to the head of Prince George's County Community College, Dr. Dukes, the other day. She said her phone was ringing off the hook from parents who federal employees not getting paid, who are not going to be able to meet the payments on their community college tuition. So this has a snowballing effect, and it's hurting federal employees, federal employee contractors. I should mention something that is important. So Senator Cardin and I introduced a bill that did pass last night out of Senate. I think this is important for people to know. We do expect it to pass the House today, I hope. And then I think the president will sign it. And it would guarantee federal employees do get held harmless at the end of the day. In other words, at the end of the day, whenever the shutdown ends, they will not be left holding the hook, and they will get paid. It obviously doesn't address the fact that people can't pay their bills that are coming due and now may become credit risks. But it is now, I'm told, actually passed the House of Representatives, so it's on its way to the White House, which will provide some certainty to federal employees. I'm glad we were able to get that done. It doesn't help all the federal contractors. I've written a letter, in fact, just yesterday, to the administration asking them to use their contract authority to also help hold those federal service employees like janitors in federal buildings, people who, food service employees, so that they're not left out in the cold as well. So that all just highlights the point that this is a loser for the country when the people who want to be at work can't provide those important services.
Great. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us today. That's Senator Chris Van Hollen from Maryland updating us on the latest in the shutdown. Thanks again, Senator.
And thank you.
All right. So, Tom, it's been a busy week here in the region with the shutdown, but of course, a lot of other important developments, too. I mean, I want to start with what's happening with the sports betting, which is a big issue kind of around the region right now. But D.C. apparently is trying to become, one of the first out of the gate to set up a sports betting operation. What can you tell us about the latest?
Well, the Supreme Court ruled that you could have sports betting on the state level, and D.C. has rushed to get it done. They're rushing so fast that they decided now there's going to be a public hearing on what the city might do. Jack Evans told me, the council member, Finance and Revenue Chairman, just told me moments ago that there will be a hearing on the 28th of this month to explore how the District of Columbia will do sports betting, whether it will be run by the D.C. Lottery and Intralot, which is the contractor for the lottery, or whether it will be farmed out to a variety of companies. This is an issue, and we'll talk to our next guest about this in Virginia, whether or not Virginia will go forward with sports betting. In Maryland, there's a move to have sports betting, but a poll, the Gonzalez poll this week says 85% of the people think it ought to be put to the voters for a test. I'm not sure what's going to happen in Virginia, but I suspect our guest will be able to tell us more about it.
And of course, another issue in Virginia this week, Corey Stewart announced that he will no longer be in the political arena.
Corey Stewart, who's been in Prince William County for 15 years and has a very good reputation of being the leader of that county, had a terrible time running for the Senate this past year with his terrible campaign, his associating with racist white supremacists and all of that. And I think Corey decided, well, whatever time he had, it has passed. And so, again, if you talk to people in that county about what he's going to be doing in the following year, as he was not going to run for county supervisor anymore, I think you're going to see that he's going to try to rebuild his reputation. I still don't understand why he went so far off the deep end.
And so let's stay in Virginia and welcome our next guest to the show, Mark Herring. He's the Attorney General of Virginia and also a candidate for governor in Virginia, which will be really exciting to talk about. Attorney General Herring, thank you for joining the Politics Hour today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be back, and unlike our federal counterparts, I am here to say that the Virginia state government is open, at work, meeting the needs of the people. And I was listening to your show with Senator Van Hollen earlier, and it is just irresponsible, indefensible that this is happening. Shenandoah National Park, closed. It impacts so many people, federal workers, contractors trying to figure out how to make ends meet now without getting paid, and it is rippling all through our economy.
And it's not just that they're not getting paid, they're not doing the vital work. And people love to just kind of make fun of the federal bureaucracy, but it does vital work.
Well, important things like food safety inspections and corrections workers and so many other different ways that work is not getting done, and it's really something that is impacting huge amounts of people. I don't think any part of our country is going to be immune from the impact of this.
And you can join this conversation. If you have questions for Attorney General Herring, give us a call at 1-800-433-8850. Email us at kojo@wamu.org. I'm Patrick Madden, a reporter here at WAMU, filling in for Kojo Nnamdi, and of course Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst.
Can we go right back to Corey Stewart with this, our guest?
Yes.
Because I think there is a change. We all know that Virginia's been a purple state, but more recently it's turned Democratic. Corey, I'd like to hear your thoughts about Corey Stewart, and also this week out in the 33rd State Senate District in Loudoun County, a seat that you once held before you became Attorney General. The Democrat Jennifer Boysko, I think it's how you pronounce her name, she won overwhelmingly against the Republican candidate. What is your own feeling about and then we'll talk about your running for governor in a moment, but there seems to be a dramatic change in the state of Virginia.
Well, I think, first of all, Virginia Democrats have really been offering solutions for Virginians and delivering results. And Corey Stewart's campaign really, I think, was a drag on a lot of the Republicans around the state. And I think we're in
They
Virginia.
ran away from him.
They did. And we elected three fantastic congresswomen now, Elaine Luria, Abigail Spanberger, and my own new Congresswoman, Jennifer Wexton. And you mentioned
that Senate seat.
That's right. So you mentioned the 33rd Senate special election this past Tuesday. I think it's important to just take a step back about the historic nature of what was accomplished, not just with the three congresswomen, but in the 10th District in particular here in Northern Virginia. The modern 10th District came around, I think, in 1952. And in the 66 years since then, only 6 years has the seat been held by a Democrat. It was when Joe Fisher was elected in 1974, then re-elected in 76 and 78, and Frank Wolf was elected in 1980.
And he owned the seat forever.
And that 1980 was the first congressional election I was old enough to vote in. So my entire adult life, we have been working at this, and Jennifer won with a solid win.
And when you look at the numbers for Loudoun County, it's the shift between this election cycle and previous, it's very dramatic. It was like almost a 10 or point swing, and you talk to voters there, and it's that was a typically Republican stronghold, right?
And then in the special election that was held just Tuesday, Jennifer Boysko won with almost 70%, 70-30 by a 40-point swing. And so I think what that shows is, especially in Northern Virginia, these are areas that used to be GOP strongholds. Suburban areas, ex-urban areas, those used to be areas where Republicans were racking up wins. It's now completely turned upside, 180 degrees, and now it's really, these are areas that Democrats are winning in solid wins, and I see that trend continuing.
And let's stay on politics. You've announced that you're running
This
for...
is the politics hour.
This is the politics hour.
This is the politics hour.
You've announced that you're running for governor, which...
he announced he will be running
for governor.
Big difference.
Which isn't until 2021. I mean, why jump into this race so early?
Well, first of all, it is the politics hour. That did make some news a little while ago. The work I've been doing as Attorney General, fighting for health care, equality, pushing back on the Trump administration and the Trump agenda, those are things that have been some of the most meaningful work I've done. It has made a real positive difference in the lives of Virginians. And, I've done a lot of thinking about it. 4 years ago, people encouraged me to think about doing it then, which I did. I gave a lot of thought to it and decided the best way I thought I could serve Virginians at that time would be to continue to serve as Attorney General, and I said I would be running for re-election when that time came. And I did a lot of thinking about this, and I thought the best way I would be able to continue that work and serve Virginians would be as governor when the time comes. You know, I've been a county supervisor trying to get the best schools we possibly could for the area I represented, working on transportation solutions, both as a state senator and county supervisor in Northern Virginia and around the state, fighting for health care. All these things I think have really prepared me well for that. And so I thought, you know, if that's the decision I've made after talking with a lot of people, talking with my family, I should just be open and transparent about it and let people know what my future plans would be. But, you know, that's still a ways off. There's a lot of work to be done. My team and I are really excited about a lot of the things that we're working on in the Attorney General's office. We've got a very large, robust package of legislation to address the rise in hate crimes in Virginia. They are up over 50%, almost 50%.
Can we get to that in a moment? But
Sure.
I want to just wrap this up. I did see that you've already filed a financial disclosure report for a campaign for governor, but you will not start raising money too much farther down the road. Is that correct?
Well, you know, we have
Yeah.
leadership PACs, and
Right.
so that work is ongoing.
Yeah, the Commonwealth PAC.
Right,
which-
one Commonwealth. So,
Now, but immediately, every seat in the legislature is up this fall. You're going to be out campaigning in the state there's just a couple of seats difference in the state Senate, a couple of seats difference in the state House, and that's your immediate goal, I think, politically.
on the political side, on the political front, next year, well, this coming
Right
year,
now.
I'll be out working as hard as I can. You know, right now, we've got the General Assembly session. Folks are in there doing the people's business. When the session's over, it's a short session, 45-day session. Then this fall, all 140 seats of the General Assembly will be up. It is a very narrow, close margin between Republicans and Democrats. So I'm going to be out working as hard as I can for our Democratic candidates to try to get to a majority in both chambers, and I think we've got a great opportunity to do that.
I just politics here. Every attorney general virtually has run for governor. Every lieutenant governor, like Governor Northam, has run for governor. Where are you and Justin Fairfax? He's a popular. He was elected as lieutenant governor. He has a part-time job. You have a full-time job. How are you guys? I mean, everyone thinks he's going to run for governor. He hasn't said it as clearly as you have. How does that affect your working together to help the Commonwealth if you have to eye each other 24 hours a day?
Well, you know, Justin and I campaigned together even after I won the primary back in 2013. He was out, you know, supporting me. In 2017, it was great to be on the ticket together. And so we are friends. We are going to continue to work together to make sure that we've got the best state in America to live, to work, to raise a family.
And then let me ask you a question that will likely come up when folks start talking about primaries and raising money. You've said, I believe, that you will not accept donations from Dominion going forward. Is that correct?
Yeah, what I've said was, you know, public trust right now in government is at a low point. And we need to do everything we can as public officials to help build that trust. Perceptions change over time, and there's a perception that with state-regulated monopolies, that public officials need to show that the decisions we make are based on what's in the best interest of the people. And I wanted to make sure that people know that I'm in there fighting for them. And so I've just decided, you know, after the last election, when this term started, that I would not accept campaign contributions from state-regulated monopolies. It's something that I think I can do to help build that trust back up for the people.
And of course, Dominion is the very, you know, powerful public utility in Virginia. And you know, Governor Northam has said he wants to go even further, and he wants to limit how much you can donate, you know, limit if corporations can make direct contributions to individuals. I mean, as we saw during the trial of former Governor Bob McDonnell, I mean, Virginia has some of the least restrictive campaign finance laws in the country. I mean, how far would you go in terms of either limiting the size of donations or banning corporations from making donations to campaigns?
You know, I think we have reached the time now to really start talking about campaign finance reform in Virginia. I like the transparency that we currently have. Any contribution over $100 must be reported, and we've got a really good transparent system. But there is too much money in campaigns and elections. I would like to find a way to try to limit that. But I also have seen in areas where when there are limits put in, it seems like the money somehow finds its way into the campaigns anyway, and then you lose some of the transparency. Another issue that we'd have to think about is, in some states where they have very low limits, it makes it very hard for candidates to get their message out, and it's starting to favor wealthy individuals so that they can self-fund their campaigns. But I think these are all questions that we need to start asking in Virginia, because we do need some real campaign finance reform.
The governor has proposed that there be, for the first time ever, a limit on individual contributions. He says $10,000. It's $6,000 in Maryland. So at least that's a starting point to change the slush fund of campaigns. It's just there's money everywhere in Virginia.
It is almost like the Wild West in terms of the amounts that come in. And if we can have this discussion, at least it's a starting point. We can talk about the transparency issues and make sure that we maintain that transparency. But the money really, I've seen it in some other places where it comes in with independent expenditures and other ways, and we really, but I applaud the governor for bringing the measure forward and beginning the conversation.
I watched the Black Legislative Caucus with your good friend Justin Fairfax leading the press conference this week, and they are supporting the governor on other bills that would allow no excuse absentee voting. Right now you have to have a blood test firstly to get in to vote absentee. But it would be that you want to vote absentee, you vote absentee. Virginia is one of the few states that doesn't have early voting. Do you support that? And also to get rid of all these identification issues, you just go in and you register to vote.
Yes.
Do you support those also?
Absolutely, and I have supported them back when I was in the Senate. The early voting is something that we need that will help not only make it more convenient for voters to cast their ballot, but also help reduce lines on Election Day. The other one, though, that is really important is getting rid of the photo ID requirement that the governor's brought forward. This is something that we need to make voting easier for people. It is a fundamental right to vote. We need to make it easier for people to vote, not throw obstacles in the way. And I remember talking to someone a couple of years ago, a Virginian. He was wheelchair bound, so had some pretty severe disabilities. He doesn't have a driver's license because he knows he's not going to be driving. And he explained, people in his situation have to arrange for special transportation to get to DMV, get a special ID made in order to do it. We should not make it hard like that. And I do find it also interesting that it seems to be one particular political party that is trying to erect those barriers to make it harder for people to vote. Democrats are the ones who are in there trying to make it easier for folks.
And let me just quickly give the number out there. Okay. Again, you can join us by calling 1-800-433-8850 or tweet us at Kojo Show. If you have a question for Attorney General Herring, now is your chance to call in.
And something else while we're on the subject of voting rights, I was really proud to stand with our former governor, Terry McAuliffe, in restoring the rights of over 150,000 Virginians. Had a little setback in the first court case, but we won the second one. I've talked to folks who've had their rights restored, and it means so much to them. I talked to one guy who said, he made a mistake, has a prior conviction. It was 30 years he hadn't been able to vote, and then he was going to vote last year, and it finally made him feel like he was a full part of the community again.
Well, Governor McAuliffe did 173,000, I think. But the problem is that the governor did propose, and legislation was introduced in the General Assembly this past week, to get rid of this automatic. There's only 3 states that automatically deny you the right to vote if you've been convicted of a felony, but it's already been killed in the legislature.
Yeah. And it's time, as I said, it's the Republicans
right.
who are continually trying to erect barriers to people coming in to vote. Democrats are the ones who are in there saying, let people express their voice through their ballots. That's what we need to do.
And Attorney General Herring, this week the U.S. Supreme Court declined a request to delay the process of drawing new House of Delegates district boundaries. This is going to be a very important issue looking ahead. This request came from state Republicans who are contesting this effort. And this is all about gerrymandering and how states are drawing up these boundaries. Where does this case go from here?
Well, first of all, a 3-judge panel had earlier ruled that 11 House of Delegate districts were racially gerrymandered. And when that ruling came out, and it was a thorough, detailed, 90-some page opinion outlining how it was done, and we should not have a racially gerrymandered district one day longer. So we need new districts that are fair and legal. And what's going to happen next is that three-judge panel, now that the stay has been denied, will be taking a look at the report of someone who is selected to independently propose maps. They'll take a look at that and ultimately approve some new maps, I would expect, probably in the next few weeks.
But how do we do this? I mean, we've seen this in Maryland and all over. I mean, what is the best way to draw these maps
here's
that
what the court's
folks don't get angry?
There's a professor from the University of California. His name is Bernard Groffman, and he's a mathematics and political professor, and he's done a report, 130-page report about how to do this. It just seems to me it's a fundamental responsibility of the state legislature to draw non-gerrymandered districts. And it just seems I wish the Democrats and Republicans could get together and simply do it.
And it should be done that way. But we've also seen how other states have taken some different approaches, and I think it's time to take it out of the hands of the legislature. I think it's time to put it in the hands of some type of an independent commission. There are some other states that have done it. Iowa is one. I think Arizona recently did it by referendum. Now, we don't have referendum in Virginia, but they changed the process by referendum to have an independent commission. And I think it's time that Virginia take a look at it.
Can we talk about guns? This is always a great subject for our listeners. You have proposed hate crimes legislation in this legislative session. And I was looking at it, and there are a variety of things to allow the Attorney General to prosecute hate crimes, to restrict paramilitary activity. I'm not sure exactly how you do that within the confines of political freedom. Monitor hate groups. I hope that wouldn't get out of control, but also to allow localities to set standards for where guns are allowed. That's a real dramatic change for Virginia. The localities could decide whether guns could be in churches or groceries or
well, for prevented events. So if there's a demonstration planned, the locality could make some decisions about whether to allow firearms or not and prohibit them if they think it's needed for safety reasons.
In the public square,
right.
Okay.
And so, I think it's important to set the context for this. We have seen a rise in hate crimes in Virginia and across the country. There was an almost 50% increase in hate crimes in Virginia from 2016 to 2017. Mm-hmm. Last year, there were 38 racially motivated assaults, 44 racially motivated acts of vandalism, 32 religiously motivated acts of vandalism. It is on the rise, and it is something that we cannot allow go unchecked. We've seen how this hate can be turned deadly with increasing frequency. We saw the mass shooting in Pittsburgh and an African-American church in Charleston, even in our own backyard in Charlottesville in Virginia. And so I held a series of roundtables around the state to talk about the rise in hate crime so I could hear directly from those communities and individuals who were impacted by it. And there were a couple of things. First of all, I saw that yes, Virginians do sense that there is an increase in hate. And for some minorities, it's causing them to look over their shoulder or drive home a different way for fear they may be attacked. But I also saw a determination and a resilience to not let it take root and spread.
I want to ask you a question from someone who just tweeted in. This is Laney. Wants to know whether the Attorney General would commute the sentences of all Virginians on death row if you were governor. Would you commute the sentences of all Virginians on death row, increase transparency in the death protocol, or take any other actions to stop state executions in Virginia? Where do you fall on the death penalty?
That's something that I would have to take a look at if I were in that situation to look at it on a case-by-case basis. As Attorney General, that's we work to make sure that fair trials happen and defend convictions. But that's something that I think we would have to take a look at on a case-by-case basis. I will say right now, though, we are working on a lot of things to do criminal justice reform. One of the things we've done is to call for reform of Virginia's cash bail system, which I think is increasing it is a factor in the increase in overcarceration. We've got a system now in Virginia that too often determines fairness and freedom based on wealth and means.
It's like debtor's prison almost.
Well, especially with folks and the driving fines. I mean, people losing their licenses. There's a lot of ways, I think, that.
So we are working with the administration on a proposal to address that, where too many people are losing their licenses because of a fine or.
And you can join this conversation by giving us a call at 1-800-433-8850. I want to go to Doug in Silver Spring, Maryland, who I think has a very interesting question for you.
Good afternoon. I had read in the Post this morning that should President Trump unilaterally fund this wall through the military, that certainly there would be pushback by the state's attorneys general to counteract that.
From the Attorney General's office?
Yeah, it would be something that we would look at very closely to see if there were some legal avenues and if Virginians were hurt by this.
You'd have to see how he writes it, because just as he tried to ban people coming into the country, there's
its first preliminary injunction to block it. The administration's lawyer stood up and said, well, if the president invokes national security, his actions are unreviewable, which I thought was a sweeping statement. Sure, the presidents always have a lot of discretion on national security, but to say across the board, unreviewable. We see autocrats in other countries claim executive powers or national security powers in order to do things that they want to try to accomplish with a program or a policy, but not in the United States of America.
And Sean has a question. He's just emailed in about sports betting, which is something we have talked about. Well, Tom, I'll let you ask him, but we have a couple emails in about sports betting.
Well, we talked about it just as you were coming in. D.C. is rushing to try to do sports betting. There's the measure at the General Assembly. How would it have come about? One, do you support sports betting in Virginia? I think you would oppose college and betting. But where are you on that? What is the process for it to be made law in Virginia? Would it be something the voters would have to approve?
Well, this is something the Supreme Court has said that states ought to be allowed to decide themselves. And I think there is so much of it already happening anyway with the Internet and people engaging in sports betting and gambling with out-of-state or even overseas entities that we need to take a look at how we best regulate it in order to make sure that it's fair and legal. And so this is a matter that the General Assembly will need to take up, and we're moving in that direction anyway. Horse racing is going to be back. There are proposals for a couple of casinos in Virginia.
Where are you on casinos? Southwest Bristol wants a casino because they're broke.
Well, yeah, and I think there are casinos in states all around Virginia.
Yes.
We're losing revenue, and I think it's time that we recognize that there are Virginians who want to bet, and we ought to take some steps forward to try to look at how we can do it in a way that is responsible and that we regulate it carefully to make sure it's done fairly and legally.
We're jumping around.
And get the revenue from it as opposed to sending it to other states.
The ERA, Virginia may this session pass the ERA, be the 38th state. Whether it has any legal effect or not, it seems to me the Republicans who have been saying that, well, it's not going to make any difference, may not move it, but it just seems like such a easy thing to do to acknowledge that women should be fundamentally treated equally.
Virginia, I think, would be the 38th
state.
Hey, wouldn't it be great if Virginia put us over the top, the 38th state to ratify it?
Even if nothing else happened.
I hope we do it. We should have done it a long time ago. But I also issued an opinion about a year or so ago that said it might have an important effect because Congress in the past has extended the time for ratification for other amendments. Congress could do that as well. And so it's important that Virginia do this. There's no reason why anyone should be discriminated against on account of gender.
And I know we're running up against the hour, but I want to go to one more caller. This is Patrick in Prince William County, who wants to know, we talked about the voter ID. Patrick, go ahead.
Yeah, so first off, I just want to say that I'm fully in support of getting rid of the voter ID law, personally. When the conversation comes up amongst friends and family, the question that's always posed is, well, then how would we confirm the identification of each voter? And, I mean, is that important?
Well, there are ways that that can be done that have been done in the past. You could bring in a utility bill, something that shows that you are who you are. But the important thing is that people be allowed to vote, that they are not suppressed and that we reduce barriers to voting. There are a lot of ways that we can do it. And this notion that there is somehow widespread voter fraud, that is ridiculous. That is not happening. There are not people showing up purporting to be someone else who they're not. And there are ways that you can do it without having to require a special photo ID.
It's astonishing to me that, we want people to vote. I think we should have voting on Saturday or something so that people can not have to take a day of work to go vote. And if you really want to make it easier for people to vote, even some states are allowing internet voting.
And the early voting would allow for that, including some Saturday hours. So there are ways that we can do this. Voters want it. It's more convenient for them, and there are no good reasons for us not to do it.
And I know we're running out of time, but what is the biggest issue you think that will come out of this General Assembly?
Well, budget issues are always tough, and this
you've got more money than ever to spend this
time. Sometimes that makes it harder.
Yes.
But I think the governor has done a great job putting forward a budget that is both forward-thinking and fiscally responsible. There are raises for teachers. Investments in our future. So I think those, budget issues are going to be the focus of a lot of the General Assembly's attention this year.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Attorney
I've got
General.
More questions.
I know.
You'll have to
handle it after the show. Thank you very much, Attorney General Mark Herring, joining us on the Politics Hour. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
So a speed date.
Well, Tom, thanks again for.
Sorry for my voice still being
I think it
weird.
came through loud and clear. It was very good. Again, today's Politics Hour was produced by Mark Gunnery. Coming up Monday, we'll continue our coverage of the partial federal government shutdown and discuss what it takes to actually join a gym. I will be listening to that. Plus, we'll talk about barriers to working out. So tune in Monday at 12. I'm Patrick Madden, sitting in for Kojo Nnamdi. Have a great weekend.